Welcome to the new normal. I'm Brian Morrissey. I've set up my new headquarters here in Miami Beach, eagerly awaiting a hurricane, which is just a great timing to move here. This week I'm joined by Michelle Lee, the editor-in-chief of Allure. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us.
Brian, hi everyone.
So before we get started, I got to do my plug. I do it every week. But if you're not already a member of Digiday Plus, you really should join it. You get like unlimited access to all of our stories. We do exclusive content only for members. We have exclusive research. We have our own research panel, and we do different live digital events. We do what's called Digiday Plus Talks every week, which are really how-to tutorials about everyone's trying to figure stuff out in this time. And so it's important for us to get people together to share those things. So we do reports and guides. When we can deliver it, we do a magazine. Michelle, we'll talk about the magazine. But anyway, if you do want to join, and I hope you do, you can use the code TNN at checkout. Just go to digiday.com/subscribe and use TNN. You'll get 20% off. So please do that. Okay, so Michelle, you're going on like 5 years now, right?
I am. Time flies. I can't believe it.
Yeah. So you joined as editor-in-chief back in 2015. We'll focus on Glossy's modern media list, not Adweek's editor of the year, although that's a nice one. But anyway, you came over from Nylon, right? And so explain your vision of like what Allure could be. I mean, where it was then and like where you wanted to take it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because I think because I'm going on 5 years, I started thinking about when I first started and actually before I first started. So I, like you said, I was at Nylon and someone had reached out to me about the opportunity. And I actually interviewed for quite a while. I met a whole bunch of people I asked before getting the job. And so they'd asked me to come up with a presentation about how I would change the brand, like how I saw on every single platform how we could shift things and become more modernized. 5 years ago, I would say, if I had to estimate, maybe about 90% of the resources went to print. It was still a very, very print-focused brand. So I dug up that presentation recently, and it's funny because a lot of the things that I talked about then, it's great to see that we made such huge progress. One of the things I talked about early on was diversity. It's crazy to think that just 5 years ago on women's magazines and advertising, pretty much everywhere, Hollywood, diversity was not really a thing. If you looked across the board at every magazine cover, it was still sort of this one image of what was beautiful. And it was typically like the tall, thin, white lady. So I really had a mission back then to make sure that diversity and representation was at the forefront of what we did. And then also my mission was to make us a more digital brand. And so I'm a huge believer in print still. Like I definitely see that print is the driver for a lot of things. It's where we drive a lot of the big cultural moments. But at the same time, obviously digital is also where it's at. So it was not only growing digital, it had to be social, video. We also now have the Allure Beauty Box. So I think going back 5 years ago, we sort of knew as a brand that consumer revenue was going to be something that was going to be important for the brand. And so we actually got a jump and a head start, like compared to a lot of other brands who are now sort of hopping on it now. So we've seen in the past couple of years, a lot of magazine brands and media brands knowing the value of, let's say, experiential. So we've had a lot of different consumer revenue. We've had licensing with our Allure Best of Beauty seal. We have the Allure Beauty Box. We have a thriving e-commerce business. So I think now, living in this new normal, I guess, with COVID-19, I think that we've been poised for the past couple of years already to be in a good position to deal with all that.
So explain, I want to get into like particularly the changes going on in the beauty industry, but just the internal challenges I think are always interesting. Because I think when there's a lot of focus, rightly so, and long overdue on quote unquote diversity. I know we'll drill into what we're talking about with diversity, but explain making the business case. I mean, because like, to me, like when we talk about businesses and businesses changing, you got to make business cases for it to really stick. I mean, businesses are not in, I know there's a lot of social signaling on Instagram and stuff like this, but ultimately, in a capitalistic structure, gotta make a case based on the money.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% agree. And I always say to people too that it's like if you believe in a brand and you believe in what they're doing, you have to support it financially too. Like I think there's a lot of people who are saying like great job on social media and that's awesome. But I think if you have the means to support a brand that you really care about and you think are doing important things, you have to then also buy their products, you have to subscribe, you have to do whatever you can to keep them around. I 100% agree that I think the business case was not necessarily even, we need to broaden our audience to be more diverse too, which is certainly a huge part of it. I think that for myself as a person of color, I have felt like I was being underserved my entire life. So a lot of it kind of comes from personal experience that I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. And when I looked at movies, TV, magazine covers, there was literally nobody who looked like me. At some point, I think Lucy Liu came around and I was excited and it was awesome, but
That's later.
one person. So I think that, once I became someone who was in a position where I had decision-making power, it was really important for me to have people be able to see themselves. And that does help to naturally grow your audience. That's a great business case for things. But I think even more importantly, we were kind of at this time within beauty of where people didn't want to look like this one narrow image of things. And so I used to refer to it as the uptown lady look. And it was, for the longest time in beauty, it was like this perfectly coiffed, fully photoshopped face where this, the person who was like the ideal of beauty had no pores, no pimples, no hair out of place. They were perfectly thin, no cellulite, every stretch mark was taken away. And I think because of social media and because of YouTube, there's been this push towards more reality, right? Like we don't want to see everything looking so like phony perfect, I think. So combined with that, I think it then became women and men also don't want to be boxed in to say, this is your one image of the beauty ideal and you have to look like this. So I think going off of that, it did become, we needed more racial and ethnic diversity. We needed more body type diversity. And then also with age too. So a lot of people probably know this, but back in 2017, we had actually banned the term anti-aging because it was that last like taboo, I think, where people were talking about, we love diversity and like, everyone can look like whatever, but then still women were being shamed about growing older. And so, especially in places like Hollywood and among models and stuff, it wasn't even just once you were past the age of 40, it was once you were past the age of 30, suddenly you were being put out to pasture. So as we started to look at this term of anti-aging, we were saying, well, we're not anti-aging. Like anti-aging is a term that for decades has been used all over the beauty industry. We actually had a vertical that was called anti-aging. So the more that we delved into it and thought about what does that actually mean and what negative stereotypes are we reinforcing by saying that, it kind of opened up a lot of our minds to the things that we as a brand were actually doing to reinforce negative stereotypes.
So how do you though bridge like bringing people along, right? Like, I mean, I think there's a lot of overdue change going on, but Allure had like an audience, right? And there was an audience, some of whom were being underserved, but some of whom are like, wait, what is going on here? Like, and I mean, we're seeing this across society. And I think beauty is like a fascinating industry. I mean, just with with Glossy, I've learned more about it than I ever knew before.
It's a great question.
Of a reflection of society and how things. But how do you bring along, the core audience, and change, but not change to the point where it's like, what is this? This is not Allure.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's definitely something that I've dealt a lot with over the past 5 years. I think the big thing that I've learned is that you have to be bold enough and not afraid to actually offend people sometimes. And so if people are going to be offended by a new direction of things, you have to understand that you are playing the long game and that even though someone might be upset and write you letters or, message you on Twitter or something saying, I'm not in love with this cover, it's actually okay. And I think that we have to make these bold moves. You just showed an image before of our most recent cover, and it was actually of Ashlyn Harris and Ali Krieger, who are, of course, of the US women's soccer team. And so someone just the other day, I think it was yesterday even, just wrote to me saying, I'm really offended by this cover because, they're a married couple. It's an absolutely gorgeous celebratory cover, but she was saying, I don't support this in my household. And I'm okay with some people being kind of like offended by this. To me, I feel like this is a gorgeous cover. It meant so much to our audience. I think that when it comes to pulling people along, you can over time pull people along, but you also have to be bold enough, like I said, to be okay if certain people drop off.
Mhm.
I think that we needed to be, we needed to stand for something. And I think you showed a cover before of Halima Aden, who was on our July 2017 cover. And so we had her in a hijab on the cover, and it was right around the time of the travel ban. And
Yeah.
so we thought, okay, what a great moment to have Halima. She was certainly not a household name at the time, but we really wanted to make this statement and with this bold line of this is American beauty. I had probably 95% of the comments being super, super positive. Everyone was like, this is an amazing statement, awesome. But then, of course, you have on social media the naysayers who are saying, you know, this is American beauty. Like, what about this? And what about this? I had people writing me snail mail letters about it saying, I'm offended. I'm going to cancel my subscription. And I think as a leader of a brand, you have to be okay. Like, I look at that as if someone is going to be offended by us putting a woman in a hijab on the cover, it's maybe not the direction that the audience, I don't
Mhm.
want my audience going in that direction anyway, and we will find our audience in the other direction.
So, I mean, the old days, like the cover would be tested, and like maybe Halima wouldn't test well.
Yep. We don't do any cover testing. I have done that in the past at other places that I've worked. I'm not a big focus group person because I think that in a lot of cases, when there is something really bold and different, people don't know that they're going to like something until you give it to them. And I would hate for a room of 10 to 12 people to bypass my own editorial decisions and also the decisions of my team. Like in a lot of cases, my team has been pushed me and said, okay, but what about if we did this? Like this Billy Porter cover actually also, this was something that we did earlier in the year, and I thought it was beautiful. We made no mention on the cover about him being our first male cover star. And it's a big deal, the fact that we have a man on the cover, but we made this more about the art of beauty. And, you know, Billy is just there because he's amazing and he does amazing things on the red carpet. He's great on pose. Like he's an amazing star who stands for a lot of things. But we didn't want to pat ourselves on the back and make it too heavy-handed of a moment either to say, you know, we could have splashed on the cover, Billy Porter is the first man on the cover of Allure. And we didn't do that because I think it's more important for us just to show that he in his own right is just a star who's worthy of the cover. And that was something that largely my team really pushed for. And I think that's the direction that we want to go in a lot of ways with diversity, is that we've done so much in terms of like groundbreaking covers and stuff. But to us, I think the future is really diversity just should be. And we don't want to pat ourselves on the back all the time. We also, I use this example a lot. We shoot a lot of nail art, and I'm a huge nail art fan myself. But we did a shoot recently where we had a bunch of different hand models, and one of them just happened to be a man. We didn't point it out. It wasn't put into a story that was all about men wearing nail art. He just happened to be mixed in with all the others. And to me, that's the future of where we need to go.
Yeah. So let's talk on this show. We always talk about acceleration. It's become a cliche, much like the new normal is a cliche. But look, these overlapping crises have absolutely accelerated trends. Let's just like sort of level set with the big trends of change that are going on right now within the beauty industry, because then we can talk about the acceleration. I mean, we've talked about diversity, and I think just obviously in representation of beauty, but I think obviously men are now part of a conversation in a way they weren't before. But the whole definition of beauty is kind of changing and what it means. Like before, it was like when you said beauty, it was really it meant cosmetics.
Mhm. Yeah, no, definitely. I think the world of beauty means so many different things too. And even honestly, like when I first started, I think makeup was the thing. And so now we've seen really so much more in the world of skincare. And that's definitely where men are being brought in a lot more too, as well as makeup. Hair has become such a big conversation. I think beauty in a wonderful way has been broadened now. And now we've also started to see wellness coming into it too,
Yeah.
because I think Allure for many years, like we've done a lot, even before my time, on body and mind and the connection between that. There's so much more research now as far as like how your skin is really influenced by your gut biome. It's really everything that we're putting into our bodies, but also environmental. We've got climate change playing a role in this too. So I think that we see beauty as now this much more holistic thing, that it's not just about putting on eyeshadow and lipstick. It's about your entire life. It's how stress is involved in things, how sleep is. So it's been really fun for us to roll in wellness a bit more too.
But how do you end up not going too broad? This is another issue I end up talking about a lot on the Digiday podcast, because like, you know, media that is focused is just in a better position than generalist things. And when beauty, I mean, I see it sometimes, you know, with Glossy, you know, we expanded beauty into beauty and wellness because it's like two halves of the same thing. But at the same time, like, you know, when you use the word wellness, you start to have to use quotes because it can be pretty much anything. I mean, your skin is impacted by a lot by like how much water you drink, and like, so like, I mean, like, how do you put guardrails into making sure that it doesn't just become so diffuse that it's about everything and so it's about nothing?
Yeah. Oh no, I totally agree. I think it is very easy to try and be everything to everyone. And I think what's great about Allure is that we do know our lane. Of course, there are certain things which are a gray area. And so our sister company, our sister brand Self, is part of Condé Nast also. So I think we've had a lot of conversations internally about, you know, Self is all about health and wellness. And then with Allure playing more within the wellness space, how do we see ourselves differentiated? I think that Self is much more health based, and they will do things on fitness. I think we don't do that. I think we very much want to see every single thing that we do through the lens of beauty. So whether that is, sometimes there are mental health stories that make sense within our world, that there's actually a huge tie-in between psychology and stress and acne and other skin issues. So we very much are looking at things always and putting it through that filter of, does this make sense within the world of beauty?
Right. So talk to me about clean beauty. Is this a real thing, or is this just a label being slapped on everything in order to
It's very real, but I will say there's a lot of confusion about it. So the difference between clean beauty, natural, organic. So we actually last year just launched our own clean seal because we wanted to help alleviate some of the confusion. Like we definitely have been hearing it a lot within the market of, what does clean mean anyway? Because honestly, because there's no national standard, every brand can just say, this is our standard of clean, and none of them are the same at all.
But what is it it's a reaction to the fact that cosmetic makeup, in some cases, was like toxic. It was like giving people like toxic stuff to put on their skin, which is
Exactly. And if you look back at history of makeup, skincare, there 100% were horrible things that people were like, there was lead in lipstick before in the past. So I think it's a reaction to that, but also it's a reaction to what's been on the internet. And some of it is real and some of it is not real. You have a lot of clean beauty bloggers out there who are kind of passing a lot of information, and perhaps there's some truth to it, but I think that sometimes there is a lot of fear mongering too, where people are afraid of certain things. And it honestly hasn't been borne out in research yet. But at the same time, I think that what it does show is that consumers are very, very concerned about ingredients, and they know so much more about ingredients and they want to know more. So in a lot of cases, like we do know that things that we're putting on our bodies, it does get absorbed into our bloodstream. So because people are concerned about it, there is this thought that if you go more clean, if you go more natural, you're a bit safer. I'm not the hugest proponent of things that are always all natural or all organic, because honestly, there are things that are all natural that are also bad for your body too. So I think that we just need to
kind of
not,
stuff that's natural that I don't want. Like,
yeah,
or
like, you don't,
near me.
it's hard to just look at a label and say, oh, they say it's all natural,
Yeah,
so it should be fine.
yeah.
Really now,
Penicillin isn't natural, but I like it.
exactly. The consumer really has to do research on their own and figure out what it is that they want to do, what they think is good for them. But at the same time, I think that from the Allure perspective, we always want to be that helpful friend who's helping
Yeah.
to give people the information. It's sort of like Botox, right? You have people who are like, I would never put Botox into my body. We say there's no shame in telling people information. So we want to be able to, if you're someone who wants to get Botox, we want to be able to provide you with the information so that you can make that decision for yourself. I think we are definitely a no shame brand.
Okay. I'm trying to think of what was the tweak mints or something like this. I remember reading about. So overall, though, the trend is towards like a healthier approach to the things that both women and men now are using on their skin, because like nobody wants toxic stuff.
Exactly. So within our clean seal, we actually have like a little manifesto that we've written about. And so we talk about these are all the ingredients that are not used in it. So typically, if you're talking about something that's all natural, it's literally all natural. With clean beauty, it can actually have some chemical ingredients, but it's just that the ingredients that are listed on something are not used in it. So you'll see certain brands like Beauty Counter, let's say, where I think they have maybe 100 ingredients that they say they will not use. But again, there's no standard. So every clean beauty brand actually has something a little bit different. I do wonder if in the future, if there will be some standard. I actually hope, and it's brand new for us. I think we have hopes that at some point, if we can get other brands on board, we would actually love to create the standard. And it's constantly changing. So we actually have it on a page online right now, understanding that it's going to be something that as new research comes out, as there are maybe concerns about certain things, we can add or take off certain ingredients in that. And you've probably read, the FDA is doing a lot of studies into sunscreen because they're looking into chemical sunscreen. So that's one thing that nobody really knows right now. There's a lot of questions. So for someone who is concerned about it, maybe they just want to totally say, okay, while it's still being researched, I don't want to use any chemical sunscreens. Maybe a year from now, there's going to be new information that says, actually, they're totally fine. That will change. And we just have to accept that new information is going to come out all the time.
Yeah. So one of the other, obviously, we're in a bit of a crisis now. We've got several crises going on at once, but we're looking at a big economic downturn, unfortunately, and it's going to last. Now, historically, cosmetics have done, I believe, well in downturns because they're an affordable luxury. You can make a person feel better about themselves at a time when they can't afford a big trip or something. We have nowhere to go. And I believe it was Leonard Lauder talked about the lipstick index, and that in recessions, lipstick does better. Obviously, lipstick must be under some pressure now for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I mean, it's something that we've talked about quite a lot as far as will the emphasis now move to eyes, the fact that everyone is wearing masks. But I still am hopeful for lipstick and lip products because just even anecdotally among people who I know, when we're on Zoom all day, I've seen a lot of women putting on lipstick because it's something very easy. And so, if you don't want to do a full face of makeup, you just take 10 seconds to put on lipstick as opposed to doing a Zoom. And like I'm on Zooms literally all day, which I'm sure you are too. Doing a whole face and eye and everything is so much more time consuming. Whereas I do still feel like what Leonard Lauder said about the lipstick index, it is something easy to put on lipstick and just feel like you're pulled together. That being said, I do certainly think that eyes are going to be a big emphasis. We actually just did a shoot recently where we had models in masks, beautiful masks, and also corresponding eye looks. And definitely I've seen that people are taking more risks with their eye looks because it is the only thing that you're seeing when you're out. And skincare has been huge during the pandemic. I think once the stay-at-home orders happened, like we were seeing this huge influx of people looking at skincare stories. People wanted to do at-home facials because they couldn't get to their dermatologist or their facialist. So I think that there are certain things that people want to take that special like self-care time at home too, the fact that they can't necessarily go out and get their services.
So on that, I mean, there's more time now that most people have more time at home, right? And there's no commuting and there's also nowhere to go. If you're in Miami, you can't really go into restaurants, so you can't eat outside. I would guess that this would lead to a influx of more involved routines. Like I know, like with Kbeauty becoming much more, it seems like it's become much more mainstream than it ever was, at least in the U.S. market. And some of that stuff, from what I know, is like pretty involved. Like it's a commitment.
It is. I'm scared to tell you what my skincare routine is. It's a commitment. It's actually, there's a new trend in Kbeauty where everyone has always talked about the 10-step Korean beauty routine. And it's honestly, there's now something called skip care. And so I think in Korea, there are a lot of women and men who are starting to see that it's more about simplicity. And so the whole thing about Kbeauty, which is absolutely, it's not a trend, it's here, it is a movement that's going to last, I think, forever. Kbeauty typically is about a lot of gentle steps. And so it does tend to be a little bit more involved. I just actually yesterday had a conversation with the two founders of Little Recipe, and we were talking about their whole philosophy is really having a skincare wardrobe, and that we talk about all the time skincare routines that people used to say, oh, I have dry skin, I have oily skin, and then this is your routine that you're going to use. The new direction that a lot of people, myself included, are moving in is more having a flexible routine. So it's that you have a skincare wardrobe. And depending on how you feel that day, it's that, oh, I feel my skin's a little bit rough today. It's a little dull. I'm going to use this. And then I'm going to layer this. At night, maybe you're feeling a little bit dehydrated. So then you're going to use different products. So I think that people in general know more about skincare and they want to know more. It's about layering. It is about creating a routine that works for them. And I totally agree with you. The fact that we have more time, people are now using a lot of like tech devices too. I'm a big fan of NuFace, which is microcurrent. So for a lot of people, like I mentioned before with Botox, I know a lot of people can't get to the dermatologist to get Botox. Microcurrent is really great because it's something where you just use it, I don't know, like 15 minutes a couple times a week, and it helps to kind of lift your skin. There are a lot of really cool tech tools out in the market right now.
But I mean, is this accelerating the sort of global? It seems like there's much more of like a global understanding of different, and Kbeauty was one, obviously a gigantic aspect of it. But it seems like there's been a globalization of the different sort of beauty routines of different cultures.
Oh, totally. Well, I think at first, I think YouTube and social media were really the accelerators of a lot of that because just within culture, there was this kind of convergence of K-pop and K-beauty. And we actually just this May did a K-pop dual cover. We had a print and a digital cover. And it was this like awesome convergence of K-pop being huge and also K-beauty being huge. And of course, like the men of K-pop, like they have incredible skin and incredible skincare routines. So we've seen a great deal coming out of Korea when it comes to innovation and just like really the love of skincare and makeup. But there's been awesome stuff happening in Japan too. J-beauty has been a big movement. There are great things even happening in New Zealand and Australia. There's a huge like natural and organic movement down there. We've seen great things happening in Africa. It definitely, the world I think is opening up to us. It used to be 10 years ago, everyone was like, what's happening in France? I want to go to the French pharmacy. And even though we still care about that, like French beauty products still are like a gold standard in a certain sense. I think that the world has opened up so much more to seeing like the cool things and ingredients that are happening elsewhere.
So let's talk about K-pop for a little bit because one of the other big trends, and I don't know, maybe it is not a trend. I think there's aspects of it, is men. I mean, men using cosmetic products, and that being a little bit more, I guess, mainstream. I mean, look, we're from the same era. I mean, Boy George and Robert Smith of The Cure were using makeup, but I don't remember a lot of it in high school. Talk about that. I mean, because I see different things, but I see prominent male celebrities wearing makeup. But are we going to see this become a lot more mainstream in U.S. culture?
Absolutely. Like I said, I think that Korea is driving a lot of innovation and a lot of trends right now. And if you go out to Korea right now, absolutely K-pop is driving a lot of that. Like the men of K-pop are very into skincare. They wear makeup, they do their nails. But also that has extended into businessmen. You'll see businessmen who do not only skincare, but who are wearing foundation, they're wearing BB cream. And already we're starting to see that here as well. I mean, again, like you said, this has been decades. Like we've seen Boy George, we've seen also like, within the LGBTQ like community, this has been something that has been around for a very long time. So I'm hesitant to say that it's a trend. It is a movement though, I think, where, like you said, it's becoming more mainstream, that the average guy, like the CEO who would never have thought about wearing foundation before is suddenly maybe on a Zoom and saying like, hey, I think I might want to wear some concealer, or I'm looking a little bit like a little dull and dry right now. Maybe I'm going to use some of this like cream. I feel like now the walls are kind of coming down and people are starting to see makeup is not just for women. Skincare is not just for women. But I think the cool thing is there is this point of where I think women have been very served towards the beauty industry for decades. Men have not really been served that much. So I think we're at this point now of where there's this huge education into how to do things. Like even teaching my husband about skincare has been kind of cool because like he's coming from a point of he wears sunscreen sometimes, he will occasionally moisturize, but I'm like, okay, you can try this cleanser and then try this. And just being able to lay things out and explain why you would do things is kind of fun.
Well, I think that I'm going to speak for men now. This is finally one of the topics of the conversation I can speak to. I think the shifting from it being about like quote unquote makeup to being about skincare, like sort of helps as like a gateway because the lines start to blur, right? And I think that's my.
Yeah. Well, I will say
Yes.
there is an easy blur between skincare and let's say tinted moisturizer, right?
Right.
Saying to somebody who maybe is hesitant to wear makeup, but to say, try this tinted moisturizer, it's foundation essentially, right? And so I think that also when we see men on the red carpet, there has been a lot more of like men like who was it? Daniel, the star of Get Out, wore Fenty makeup on the red carpet for something, and like that's awesome. And I think that the more that we see people who are kind of breaking down that barrier, it's just going to become more and more of again not a trend but a movement.
So talk about Fenty. How significant is that? Like as like development of like a brand. I mean, because we talk, diversity is obviously a giant issue, and you know, it seems like the cosmetics industry was, like many industries, was very, very focused on white women.
Yeah, Fenty was huge, and Fenty was not the first brand to do darker shades of foundation, certainly. But I think the fact that Rihanna was kind of that first person to put it front and center and to say every single thing that we do, it's not just about having the 40 shades of foundation. It's that from the get-go with this brand, you are going to see every image and every product is all about being inclusive. And I think that, after Fenty came out and they made this big splash with the 40 shades of foundation, we started to see some other brands who were like, but wait, we've been doing that too. But they were doing it in a way that was not putting it front and center. And this is getting a little bit too involved, but there is frustration from some darker skinned people too, that there's a little bit of a fakery going on with certain brands where they'll say, we've got 40 shades of foundation, but then when you go to the store, they're not stocking the darker shades. So I think that Rihanna and Fenty, like what they did was they created a truly authentic brand where because it's something that was so important to her, and it's not just about skin color too, like we see now in her fashion brand, but also in all of like their marketing and advertising, they've done such a good job of being inclusive in other ways too. They used Joanie Johnson in one of their campaigns, who's like over 70. They're totally body inclusive. Like it's a brand where they truly care about serving everybody in their audience.
Right. So also I would guess, I mean, we talk about the changes during this time. I mean, people can't go to Sephora or Ulta and the beauty industry and particularly cosmetics has always been like, they always talk education and stuff like that. You got to try stuff on. And it seems like a lot of beauty groups got caught behind in their own digital transformations. And I think you see it in some of the results of the companies. I mean, is this the moment for like these kind of AI tools, or are they just not up to snuff? I mean, we have to do with what we have, but.
Yeah. Oh no, it's definitely the moment. I was at CES a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of cool tech that's happening. I think that in a lot of ways, not even just within the beauty and retail space, but I think that COVID has really accelerated a lot of things. And so it has accelerated this need for better technology. So we actually, we're turning our November issue into a moment of shopping. And so for this reason that, we do have this huge audience of beauty lovers who some of them can maybe go to the store. A lot of them are buying online, but it's also, even for the Sephoras and Ultas that are open right now, it's such a different experience because they've taken away all the testers to be hygienic. And so it used to be the fun of going to like a Sephora or Ulta was going and then you're swatching all the products on your arm, you're trying things, maybe putting it on your cheek. So the fact that that's now been taken away, there is now this need for more augmented reality. I definitely have heard a lot about touchless systems. If it's maybe trying a skincare product, maybe it's something that's voice activated that you just put your hands up and then you get a little squirt of it so you're never touching anything. But for our November issue, we took a step back and we thought, okay, how can we help the industry too? Like we are a physical product that gets put into the hands of people in their homes all over the country. So how can we actually change up the magazine and make it exciting for people to want to then view, and how can they experience products in a different way? So I can't say too much about it because it's not out yet, but basically what we're doing is we're calling what we're doing is breaking the book. And so rather than having a front of the magazine and a big feature well, we're going to separate the whole thing into departments, like a beauty counter, basically. So we'll have a section for makeup, hair, skincare, and fragrance. And we are also doing a partnership with UCAM. So we're going to have augmented reality throughout. So you'll see just beautiful visual candy of like products and people wearing things, but also then you'll be able to try on those looks when you're looking through the magazine too. So in addition to that, we want to have a whole moment in November for shopping and just like being excited and experiencing products in a different way across digital, across social and video, and also with the beauty box too. Like we definitely want to do special things that, because we are home so much right now, having those products where they can be delivered to you and you can be experiencing those things is really exciting. We actually just did, probably about a month ago, we did a fun masterclass with Joanna Vargas, who's a famous facialist. And so people were able to buy this a RIFA tool, which is basically a face roller. So as they were watching Joanna in this masterclass with two of our editors, they were also able to kind of experience it on their own at home. So I feel like we're going to see more of that too, that you'll be able to send people little kits of products before you do a Zoom event or something. And so everyone can still be experiencing it at home. It's just, honestly, it's required us thinking about things completely differently.
So a big portion of your audience, I think a growing portion is Gen Z or younger people. And I can remember, I don't know, probably 12 years ago at Adweek doing a story about beauty stars of YouTube, like Michelle Phan and things like this. I learned a lot at that time. Where has that migrated to TikTok? Is TikTok becoming like, because I remember like YouTube was so powerful with beauty influencers. Is that now shifting to TikTok? Are you seeing?
It has a bit. I think that there are fewer TikTok beauty stars than there were YouTubers. Like, I still think that YouTube and Instagram have a huge number of beauty influencers who are still absolutely influential. And I think the A-list of them are now even beyond being just YouTube stars. Like, they truly, some of them have launched their own brands. They're beyond just being influencers. Charlie D'Amelio and her sister Dixie are like the biggest stars on TikTok right now. They're not beauty stars though, but they did just do a collaboration with Morphe. So I think what we're seeing is that people are growing an audience on TikTok. And then there are brands who say, okay, great, you have this gigantic audience. How do we now play in that space with you? I've started to see a little bit more in the world of skincare and definitely with makeup and TikTok. I think people are kind of taking a little bit of a wait and see approach though. For the most part, I mean, I have a 12-year-old daughter and she's been on TikTok for the longest time. I think that brands are still kind of in their infancy trying to figure out like, how much should I play in this space?
Okay, so still TBD on TikTok replacing YouTube as a way people discover beauty.
Yeah, well, I think the thing with TikTok too is it's so short format that it's great, but you can only do certain things on TikTok. Whereas on YouTube, the trend is really going long, right? Like everyone now, it used to be everyone wants snackable content with that like word that everyone used to use. And now it's no longer snackable. It's more on YouTube. You want like the 10 and up like minute videos. And those types of things you can really get into detail. And then that's, to me, that drives a lot of engagement and drives a lot of people saying, I have to buy that product.
Yeah, beauty is always fascinating me as an industry. I mean, first of all, it's massive, and I don't think it gets enough attention for how massive it is. But that, like, Sephora and Ulta have like played this oversized role, right? I mean, we talk about like platform. I mean, in the media world, I always talk about platforms and stuff like this. But then, if you're in the beauty world, or like Sephora and Ulta, like play a gigantic role, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I think what they've both done in a great way is they thought about community too. And when it comes to beauty, um, you know, when I was in high school, I always use this as an analogy. When I was in high school, the cliques, the groups that you were in, it all kind of surrounded around music. Like, this is the type of music I really like. So these are my friends. In the beauty world, you tend to find your community based on what you like. So it might be a certain aesthetic that, like, you've got a really edgy look and you like a kind of like more goth, like, goth colorways or something. You kind of find these brands that have
Yeah.
created a community towards that.
Well,
Or
that's
you
like
like,
Glossier, right? I mean, Glossier, it was the look that.
absolutely, it's the no makeup, glowy, glossy
Yeah.
skin, dewy look. And if people like that aesthetic and they like that community, you feel this kinship towards people. So I
Hmm.
think that Sephora and Ulta have done a really great job of doing that, where people are, total beauty fans and they kind of eat that up. I think that they both have done really interesting things in store, and I definitely am very curious to see, like, with the pandemic, how things are going to progress. We've had great partnerships with both of them too. We've done a lot of campaigns with Ulta where I know that they and Sephora too, like, they both are very invested in diversity and representation. And that's something where I think that it's really important to the beauty audience as well. So I think it's been a great move for them.
So obviously, we're seeing an explosion of DTC brands, and there's a ton of DTC brands in beauty, and you go through periods of disaggregation and reaggregation. I mean, but it creates, I mean, it's an opportunity for you because it must create a very confusing landscape with all of these new brands that have come onto the market.
It's too much. I will say it's too much. We when we were still in our office, you know, 5 years ago, I would get a lot of packages, but then maybe about a year ago, just the number of new brands and the number of launches became truly too much. Especially like we would see certain trends like CBD, for example, and suddenly
Yeah.
CBD in so many new products. There were CBD skincare brands and makeup and everything. And so I have this one corner of my office where I would get all my packages. Just seeing the number of new things, it's like there had to be a shakeout. And that's a little bit of what I was saying before, that I think that
Yeah.
the pandemic has accelerated some of this, where some of these other brands that were just kind of like coming along for the ride because they saw an opportunity in beauty, they're not going to be able to survive.
Yeah.
So I think that the pandemic is going to make people understand they want to invest their money in something that works and that they believe in, that they feel like they see a community in. And then everything else that just feels extraneous is just going to end up going away.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of undifferentiated products. I mean, the DTC world alone is just like so much of it is just simply marketing and using efficient marketing, customer acquisition channels like Instagram, particularly.
Yeah.
Um,
And on the flip side of that, there are some amazing DTC brands. And I think those are the ones where they start off with founders who really care about the products,
mhm.
founders who really care about building an audience and doing it in a smart way. I totally agree, though, that there's a lot of products out there that are just copycats, and brands that are copycats. And they think that there's like this blueprint of how to become a popular company, like maybe following the Glossier model. But if you're not an Emily Weiss who like literally lives and breathes that brand,
Yeah.
the consumers are really savvy and like they can see straight through that.
Yeah, I love the story. I always joke with our glossy editors about the story of the inspiration and trying to solve a problem that they just happened to identify between their first and second year at Harvard Business School. Just who would have thought? Um, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the questions that we got beforehand. We got a lot of it. We got a few questions about diversity, like internal and external. Um, what is your top recommendation for magazine publishers to bring in greater diversity to their workforce? I mean, we have a slide up here about Allure's own internal diversity, I believe.
Yeah.
And you guys have done a better job probably than most magazines.
So I
But
don't know if you're familiar with Pull Up for Change, but Pull Up for Change was an initiative started by Sharon Shuta, who's the founder of Woma Beauty. And so when a lot of people were posting, a lot of brands were posting on Instagram during Black Lives Matter saying like solidarity. And so she said, okay, that's great for you to say on Instagram as a brand that like, we support Black Lives Matter, but let's see what your executive team looks like. Let's see what your staff looks like. You can say all you want to, but are you actually, when you look behind the scenes, are you a team that's truly diverse? And so it started within beauty, and now I think some other brands, I want to say like Nike and some others, maybe Reebok, have also entered into this. So we wanted to do this as well. So we participated, and so we did. We looked at our staff, and as you can see on here, we broke it down by how people self-identify. And I'm super proud with how we have changed our staff over the past 5 years, and we've become more diverse. I think we fully accept, though, that there's always more room to grow. We certainly are not saying like we are done and like there's no more work to do. We always have work to do. It's not easy, though. And I think that when I started 5 years ago, I was just a broken record about it. And I think that it has to come from the top. If you don't have somebody who's at the top who is going to push for that, you can certainly be someone at any level, from a junior level to mid-level, whoever. Just be loud about it, and you have to be insistent. For example, if I'm hiring for a role, I insist on it being a diverse pool of candidates. And if it's not diverse yet, I won't hire. So I think a lot of times people feel a pressure, especially in these hard economic times. We feel the pressure of we can't have an open head for too long because there's just too much work to do, or we're afraid that the head is going to get taken away or something. I think you have to be strong enough to know that it's okay. Even if it's a couple weeks, if it's a month, if it's a couple months, if you don't have enough of a diverse pool of candidates, don't hire that person yet. In terms of like where to find people, I think that once you have a more diverse staff, it tends to kind of grow that way because people know people. I'm also on the board at an organization called ColorCom, and it's all about women of color in communications. I've had great luck going to them, just being like, hey, does anyone know anyone? I think most bigger companies now have a chief diversity officer. So a lot of times they have been super helpful when it comes to putting out feelers. But I think that for anyone out there who feels like their company does not have the quote unquote pipeline, right? We always hear about the pipeline problem.
Yeah, that's such an out.
Oh, it's no excuse, because there is a pipeline of people out there. It's just that maybe your company is not aware about how to actually tap into it. So we all need to take it upon ourselves as hiring managers, but also just as employees. If you feel like you're not getting what you need at your company, be incredibly loud about it. And in this point in time, I think every company has to listen.
Yeah. I mean, one basic when we talk about it internally is borrowing from the NFL, the sort of Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule was like they had a problem. Their players were very diverse, but then the coaches were not. And so they just had a rule that you had to interview a person of color for open coaching positions, because what they did was they would just recycle the same head coaches, I guess expect different results. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I think for us too, we are actually putting out an action plan at some point soon as part of Pull Up for Change about what we're committing to as well. I think even in terms of like our own staff, it's also important for us to look at, we do a lot of photo shoots, and it's really important that we have a diverse team who is behind the camera too. I think a lot of people in media and advertising and marketing kind of look at who's in front of the camera, right? Like who we have on the magazine cover, but it's also equally important to figure out, do we have a diverse diverse crew on set when it comes to the photographer, the stylist, the hair people. It all really does make a difference.
Yeah. So we had a question. I don't know if you know, we're entering into an election. Are you just saying, and the question was that, beauty was thought of as sort of a sort of safe haven from these kinds of things, but these are not normal times. So how are you looking at the election, or does it not impact at all, you think, how your coverage?
It absolutely does impact. And so one of the things that really annoys me, and it's annoyed me over the past couple of years since the last election, has been if we do anything that's remotely considered political, I instantly get deluged with comments being like, stick to beauty. So I stick to beauty.
In your lane.
Don't cannot be political. And I have always said that beauty is inherently political because it's all about how we look. And if you think about racism, it's all about how we look and our skin color, our appearance, it's gender, it's body, it's so many different things that we can't not talk about politics. And also, we are a brand that truly stands for women's rights and women's issues. So I think that we have to be really loud about things. I am not afraid of wading into the political arena. And I agree with you. These are very tricky times and these are odd times. And I think that for any brand, you have to stand for something. I just had a conversation with a couple people the other day that when I first started in media, I think that the way that we thought was you need to appeal to the widest group of people. And the way that you would do that is you try and be like Switzerland, right? You're neutral on everything. You try to like not offend anybody, like just by being super safe with things. And I think that the way that I look at stuff now is that you have to pick a side, like you have to stand for something. And especially in these times, to choose, let's say, to be anti-racist or support LGBTQ rights. Like these are not things where I think that there are two sides. I see it as we are on the right side, and so we need to move in this direction. And anyone who's saying like that they're not anti-racist, it's again, I don't think there's an argument there. So I see it as, I represent a brand, but also as a brand, we have certain pillars that we stand for, and we have to make sure that we stand for women, for human rights, for all of those things. And whether or not people view that as political, that's okay.
So we had a few questions about trends coming out of the coronavirus. One of the questions was about what this means for like the higher end, indulgent, I guess, if you will, like beauty brands. Will we inevitably, I don't know, will we inevitably see a shift away from those kind of indulgent beauty items?
So actually, weirdly, I think what we're seeing is kind of the opposite. So a lot of the brands actually that were in Target and CVS and like Walgreens and stuff like drugstore beauty was doing very, very well for a while because those stores were still open during all of this, right? Like if you were going to Target and you're getting your food or your detergent, your toilet paper, everything, you could actually still stop in the beauty department and get those things. So on the lower end, those products were doing really well. But also what we're seeing now is that people, because they are home, because they can't necessarily, again, go to the dermatologist and stuff, they really are on hunt for something that works. So they're willing to invest money in something that they feel like is going to work. The part of that I think is maybe a bit in trouble is in the past 10 years or so, like there had been this rise of very expensive luxury beauty products that were kind of iffy on whether they worked or not, right? That it's like, it was a lot of marketing, that it's like, it's all the very fluffy marketing where you don't know what the ingredients are and everything, and they're kind of selling a dream. I do think that in a certain sense, those products are going to be in trouble because people want to see something where they know that there are going to be results.
Okay. One of the other questions was, what do you see as the biggest emerging beauty category?
Skin, for sure. I mean, I can't even say that that's emerging because it's already here. But even just when I look across the board at how our content does, when I started, it was so much about makeup. And I think a lot of that was driven by YouTube. And now skincare, I think because it has opened up into this other market of people used to think like, oh, if you're over 40, you care about skincare. The fact that now you do have the Glossier people and everything, skincare is starting in like the early teens, if not younger. Like I said, I have a 12-year-old daughter and she and her friends all do face masks now. It's something where the age category has broadened out, but also through gender, through everything else. I also think that we're having a big hair moment, and body. Body has also been the big one. That it's funny because I know many people who will spend thousands of dollars on products for their face and they'll do this whole elaborate routine, but then they forget to like put moisturizer on their bodies. So now within the past year or two, I would say we're seeing this great movement towards people caring about their skin on their body as well, whether it's shower products, whether it's exfoliators. We're seeing a lot more tools for body too. So that's been really cool and exciting.
Okay, so final one, and then we'll let you go, is this is near and dear to my heart. Lessons from podcasting.
Oh, lessons from podcasting.
Yeah.
So we, of course, have the Allure podcast, and we actually launch very soon our second podcast called The Science of Beauty. I think that the lessons have been not to try and script them too much, right? Like I think that when I first started, this is my own personal thing. I'm a planner, right? I always like to pre-plan things, but I also have found that the best conversations happen when they're not too planned out. So that's been my personal thing. But also, when it comes to finding an audience, I think that a lot of times, like we all know, there's a gazillion podcasts out there. We think sometimes that the work is done when you're just recording it, but really more of the work is done finding the audience because there's so many podcasts out there right now. So I think that when anyone is starting to think about a new one, just really in the very beginning, thinking about how am I going to promote this? How am I going to get people to listen? And making sure that you have a regular cadence of them. But yeah, podcasting has been so fun. Like I feel like I also am like a huge podcast listener. I do think the world of podcasts is probably changing a bit because people are not commuting as much. I know in my own life, I live in New Jersey, so I would travel into the city every day, and I'd have at least like an hour in the morning, an hour home, and I would get through like a lot of podcasts in that time. I think that our podcast consumption is probably changing a little bit. So it's also listening to your audience and thinking about, maybe in the past I wanted an hour-long podcast, but maybe now the time that I actually have to listen to it is a little bit smaller. So really making sure that you're flexible enough to change with whatever's going on.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to leave it there. But thank you so much, Michelle. Really appreciate it.
Brian, thanks everyone.
And thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next week with a new episode. We're still finalizing the guests, but we're actually going to continue. This is going to be a mini series. We started with looking ahead on beauty, and we're going to do fashion next week. And so we're going to be talking with an expert, I think I know who, about what emerges out of these various crises in the fashion world. So I hope to see you next week. Thanks again, Michelle.
Bye.
Bye.